evening, and welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Sahuarita Unified School District Governing Board. At this time, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item of business is the oath of office. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, ma'am. President Reese, members of the board and public, as is required under statute, this first meeting of the calendar year during election years is reserved for the very special swearing in of newly elected governing board members. And we'd like to thank members of our community for their willingness to serve in this very important role. I often say school board service is one of the most pure and special forms of public service. It's unpaid, it's critically important, it's locally grounded, and I believe we have two gentlemen that we need to administer the oath to this evening, so I'll refer it back to you, Madam President.
Thank you. Dr. Sparks and Mr. Rodriguez, please join me in the front. I will have you gentlemen repeat after me. I state your name.
I, John Sparks,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same,
and defend them against all enemies,
and defend them against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic.
and that I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
of the Governing Board for Sahuarita Unified School District Number 30
of the Governing Board of Sahuarita Unified School District Number 30
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. At this time, we're going to take a brief 10-minute recess, allow our audience and family members to please come congratulate our new board members, take some pictures and the like. We'll resume in about 10 minutes.
Madam President, just one, mi culpa. I was asked if either of the newly sworn-in members would like to make any comments, and I had told them that if they wished to make a few remarks, that they could. So I was,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone who voted for me, have taken the time to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to serve you. I spent my entire professional career as a public servant, and it was an absolute honor to serve my country. I am very excited to have this new opportunity to serve my community. Like you, I built a life here in Sahuarita. This is the only home my daughters know, and I want to keep your memories of Sahuarita special, because this is a special place. I feel very privileged to contribute to my community. I also want to add that I value your trust and that I will work hard every day to earn it. My door is always open, and I welcome your conversations. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sparks?
As I stand in this evening again, I am privileged and I feel Humbled that the people of Sahuarita Unified School District have seen fit to elect me again to serve in this position, in this role. And I hope that I continue to maintain your faith and your trust, that your vote allowed me to be here. And I am grateful to be here and grateful for the people of Sahuarita that have made the experience here in this town very special for my family and children too, and hold it dear. But I'm grateful for my family to be here tonight, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve the fine school district, Sahuarita Unified School District, its staff, its students, and its parents. Thank you.
So now we'll take a brief 10-minute recess to be able to congratulate our new members.
This might be a,
So as soon as it comes on, abilities to put some in a couple of pickup trucks or fast food. So we're just making sure we can do it, and then we're going to tell them yes, if we can.
Brad, I can hear you breathing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to resume soon.
The volleyball stuff is not going to be on that same, because it was the 2 board meetings I had the 21st.
uh-huh. So you're good?
There's no conference. Thank goodness. It worked out. The 28th is better.
If you, I used, I, it's green. CS.
All right, we're going to go ahead and resume the meeting at this time. The next item of business is the reorganization of the board. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, ma'am. President Reese, members of the board. This item involves the selection of individuals from the board to serve in roles as president and clerk. In policy, there is no formal process or specificity about that. It doesn't even really reference it in terms of technical procedures. It just refers to president and clerk. So I would again defer to you in terms of initiating the process to identify our president and our clerk.
Thank you. I open the nominations for the office of president.
Madam President, I'd like to nominate John Sparks for the office of President of Sahuarita Unified School District Governing Board.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? If there are no other nominations, may I have a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
This does require a second.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to close the nominations for the office of president. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. So, since we only have one person, I guess that means Dr. Sparks, you are our new board president. Congratulations.
Thank you, Denise. I now open the nominations for the office of clerk.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I nominate Sherry Lowell for the office of clerk.
thank you. I have a nomination for Miss Lowell for the office of clerk. Do I have any other nominations?
I would like to nominate myself for the office of clerk.
Thank you. I have a nomination for Sherry Lowell and Miss Warner for clerk. I do need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Because there are more than one, we will do a roll call vote. Please, when called upon, indicate Miss Lowell and Miss Warner. Miss Reese.
Sherry Lowell, please.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you. Ms. Warner.
Nicole Werner.
And Ms. Lowell.
Sherry Lowell.
Thank you very much. The vote has been taken, and Ms. Lowell is the elected clerk of the board. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number D. Sorry. This belongs over there now. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to item number D, roll call. Ms. Palacios.
Governing Board President John Sparks.
Here.
Governing Board Clerk Sherry Lowe.
Here.
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 Present.
Present. Here.
Here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palacios. We'll move on to item 2A, approval of the agenda. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. President Sparks, members of the board and public, I would recommend approval of the agenda as it was revised.
Thank you very much. Do I have a recommendation for the approval of the agenda? A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and move to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to approval of the minutes. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. President Sparks, members of the board and public, you have in your packet draft copies of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting of the board on December 7th, 2022. And after your review and consideration, I do recommend approval as presented.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes? Thank you. A second.
Second.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we'll move on to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. Any opposed say nay. Thank you very much. Ratification of the vouchers. Ms. Huey.
Good evening. Tonight, I recommend payroll voucher ratification number 12, new payroll number 16, for a total payroll not to exceed $4,813,757.61. Additionally, I recommend expense vouchers 1043 to 1050 and ratification number 3001. And just to note, that was a refund that we had to capture, which is why you see that negative in there. And then new expense vouchers for approval 1061 through 1064 with new total expense approval of $9,747,509.88 for a grand total of payroll and expense ratifications of $14,561,267.49.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion for recommendation to pass the ratification of the vouchers?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Thank you very much. Dr. Valenzuela, Superintendent's report.
Yes, sir. Just a few items of note. We always begin with the enrollment report. And, you know, it's hard to believe, but we completed semester 1 of the 22-23 school year. And this is usually a time when there is some shift. So I wouldn't become too alarmed about the negatives. There are some positives there too. In talking with principals today, they are also enrolling them, and that takes time. Some of the ones that have left, it's quicker to do, and it was already done. But we'll continue to watch those trends. I would note that if you look at the other graph, there it is, the blue line is still over the yellow line by about 65 to 70 students. And if you notice the blue line, it still has not dipped below the level that we started with, which was a trend that we saw during those pandemic years, that it would go below the initial level. So we're still holding on. We all know, of course, about the broader economic factors, the inflation factors, and interest rates and all that stuff that's going on. But the long-term vision and anticipation is that we're going to continue to prosper. We're going to continue to grow together as a community, and the future still looks really, really bright. So those are the numbers. The other thing I just would be remiss if I didn't mention, if I didn't extend thank you to the Country Fair White Elephant. On December the 8th, I received checks for all of our schools and multiple different special programs, totaling an amount of $185,000 from the Country Fair White Elephant. Just a tremendous example of that, what I call the Sahuarita Winds spirit, which was here before I came. I remember learning of the White Elephant and what they do, and just being amazed at how they have a model for tapping resources that people no longer need and using them to create amazing outcomes. We are bringing back the Country Fair White Elephant Variety Show, which allows us to showcase our programs from K through 12 and the fine arts and otherwise that really say thank you to the White Elephant, but also let them see what their dollars and their investments are going into. And as always, our young people are the best ambassadors that we have. So that's coming up in February. I also have a picture from the town of Sahuarita. I notice our mayor is still in the house, Mayor Murphy. He feels right at home, I'm sure. And I know that he occupied one of these chairs and served on this governing body for many years. But they had an amazing holiday parade, and we were proud to participate. The transportation department lit up a bus, literally. And so I think we have a picture of that. So we see some transportation staff, and even see some governing board members there with big smiles on their faces on what was a very, if you remember, a very chilly night. And it was about this year, it was about a week before Christmas. So just a great community event and just a testimony of kind of how we do things here in Sahuarita. And the only other thing I have, President Sparks and members of the board, is that tomorrow is the board lunch, or as I like to call it at SPS, the board brunch. It begins at about, it actually begins at 10:10, and I know it's in the middle of the day, but for any that can make it, we'll meet at 10:10 at the district office and walk over to the cafeteria, and I will welcome any of you that are able to make it. And that is my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. We'll move on to governing board reports, and we'll go ahead and start with Mr. Rodriguez.
I have no report.
Thank you. Ms. Warner?
I would just like to offer another congratulations to Mr. Rodriguez, who's newly elected, and the re-election of John Sparks, and to our newly appointed clerk and president positions. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Reese?
I'd just like to wish everyone a Happy New Year, and glad to have so many people here joining us tonight, and looking forward to all of the events that we've got coming up for our schools as the semester kicks off with sports and various other activities. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lowell?
Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun to be in the parade. Those were all of the bus drivers that dressed into my battery, okay, that dressed up, and it was great to be a part of our transportation team, greeting our community, and with the town of Sahuarita. I was lucky enough to be with a new family that had just moved into our community the night before, and I took him to that event. I don't know, is Mayor Murphy still here? And he lit up the tree and the fireworks went off, and the youngest girl said, "I feel like I'm in a Hallmark movie." And I looked back to the Parks and Recs and I said, "They've been here less than 12 hours. And so I said, welcome to Sahuarita. And so I'm excited for them to see our district and all that we have in our community. I'd also like to thank Freeport McMoran for their very large donation to our school, as well as the Country Fair White Elephant and Glenn and Lois money that donated down to Sopri. It was just an amazing gift, as well as everybody else. If you look at our gifts and donations, we couldn't do it without them, as well as our boosters that do so much for all of our students, to give them what they need and the opportunity and experience. So I'm just very grateful for that. I'm also thankful that everybody's back in session, and continue to encourage our administrators to keep those social media posts going, so we know what's going on at the different schools, and that's been so helpful, and it's great to see, and people can watch that as well. So Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Lowell. And I'd again like to express my sincere and deep gratitude and humility to serve the people of Sahuarita again, and also to serve in the role as board president again. It's been a few years, but I'm excited to be able to serve in that capacity again. And I think this is the time of year that I think, and I look around our community, and I think, man, we really do live in a cool place. And I think even my children will say, we call it the Sahuarita bubble. where people still stop when the kid falls over on a bike and people help their neighbor. And we have, festival lights parades, and we have a town council that is approachable and accessible, and a mayor that comes to school board meetings, who sat on this board for many, many years, and have people that serve the people of our community. And while we may not always, always agree, I think we do always agree that people are important and that we should do our best to help the people around us. And every time I come through the holiday season and this first meeting of the year, and I sit here and I think about that, I'm grateful to live in a place where we have White Elephant and Freeport-McMoRan, and we have boosters and restaurants that give percentages to boosters for football and band and cheer, and not just one, like all of them, right? And that when the school shows up and says, hey, we're doing this thing, they say, sure, no problem. And I just am grateful to live in what I think is a pretty cool place and be able to serve in this capacity. So that's all I have to say. So thank you for being here this evening. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. I have no call to publics, correct? Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and move on to new business, online public auctions. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir, President Sparks, members of the board and public, you have in your packet a list of items, mostly old technology. I guess in technology terms, old is a relative term, but thanks to Mr. Villa and his leadership of our technology operations, we've really moved more methodically to a phased process of replacing and renewing technology for its operational and its programmatic purposes, and I'm grateful to see that direction. But we do have items, and we will always try and capture every residual dollar that we can in support of our mission, and that's what this is a list of mostly old IT-related items that we don't need anymore, but that might have some residual value. And so I would recommend you're designating them as fit for public auction at this time.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion and a second. Thank you very much. Any discussion? I'd like to add that I'm grateful that we've moved to that kind of methodical replacement model, that we're regularly moving things forward, because moving till something is moving to pure obsolescence and then trying to purchase a large number of items is not easy, and so I'm grateful for that. So that's all I have to say. Discussion? All right, thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, exciting item. Dr. Valenzuela, new business construction update.
Yes, sir, President Sparks and members of the board and public. This next item is not an action item per se, but it's really, really important. And I think it correlates with that vision of prosperity and the promise of the future and growth and all of that. I hope that as you participate and listen to this presentation from Mr. Downs, to whom I will turn over the microphone shortly, I hope you'll keep in mind that we are acting with intentionality and resolve in multiple ways, that we are looking to the future, again, to the point of proactivity. We're looking ahead to our needs to accommodate that growth so that it's a healthy growth, and that we're being thoughtful in how we're doing this. I hope that when you listen to Scott, you'll hear that this is a thoughtful process. You'll feel that it's an inclusive process where people have a chance to contribute ideas so that the overall outcome is better than it would be if anybody's making these decisions in a vacuum or alone. And I hope you'll see that there's a high level of resourcefulness in how we're using the public's dollars. Again, this update is about the school facilities board project. I know they call themselves something else now, but these are state funds that we've procured, pursued, and qualified for, but they're state funds to add space to our two brick and mortar high schools, Sahuarita High School and Walden Grove High School, to the total of about $19 million. It's a tremendous amount of work, planning organizationally, meeting, and actually, not to mention, doing the actual work and paying for it. And I'd like to thank Mr. Downs for his leadership. He and I, over many years, have done more than a few of these. and Scott is really good. And I think you'll see these descriptors that I mentioned in his presentation, and hopefully, I hope it'll get all of us thinking about the future for all schools, not just the high schools, but that as we grow, as buildings get older, we use our buildings, they are community resources, that we are thinking about what are some of the other needs so that we can plan going forward and discuss and include and initiate action to make sure that all of our facilities are always being future ready, well-maintained, safe, and suitable to our mission of advancing student success, even as that definition continues to evolve in this rapidly changing dynamic world that we live in. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Assistant Superintendent Downs. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Valenzuela. Good evening, board members and members of the public. This is a very exciting time. I know a lot of times administrators maybe get the opportunity to build one school, and I'm happy to say I'm on 2.5 schools and now a whole bunch of remodels and additions. So it's a very fun and exciting process to come see the community, the teachers, the principals' ideas come to life. It's really neat to build. The things I'm going to be talking about today is the budget, where it comes from and how we're spending it, how we determined the square foot and the cost separation for each site, basically what site was getting what and why, determining which types of classrooms we were going to build at each site, the location, the fun part, the design and what it's going to look like, the timeline, and then future budget considerations that we're going to have. So first of all, for the budget, SFOB, which stands for School Facilities Oversight Board, the public entity that gives money to build schools, they have a very conservative formula. Go ahead, next slide, Betsy. The important thing here is showing the budget. We have a total budget of $18.2 million that they gave us. When they give us the money, there are requirements that come with it. It will have to house 443 students. We have to build 55,375 square feet. And as you can tell in the middle of the screen, they originally gave us $11 million, and they had a refunding mechanism and changed their formula. So we got some extra money, which was the $7 million, which put it at $18 million. And at the bottom, you can see where that went from $200 a square foot to $330 a square feet. That is not construction cost, that is budget cost. So that cost for your architect, your construction team, your permits, and everything else that you have to do. So that is not a square foot price. At the bottom, I just put a little formula there with 443 students, and I know 28 students per classroom is very conservative, but that told us about 16 classrooms that we would have to build, and again, conservative. And that number comes important when we started analyzing which school should get wet. For the funding sources, SFOB gave us $18.2 million, and our director of JTED came up with $970,000 because he wanted to supplement that. So our total budget was 19.2. Our expenses for our architect, which is Swayman Associates, was 1.1, and I'm happy to note that we signed a contract with them where they wouldn't exceed 6.5% of the budget, and they knew that we were tight, and they voluntarily cut their costs as much as they could and brought it all the way down to 5.2%, which I appreciate. We have other costs of $315,000. And just to tell you what those are quickly is public water plan reviews, construction reviews, PDEQ permits, rural metro permits, water meters, TRICO engineering. So there's a lot of other costs that don't go into the actual building, but permits and tests that you have to do. Our construction, we had started at $18.9 million, and the contingency of $548,000 is an SFOB requirement. We cannot spend that money until the project is done. That's how they guarantee you're not overspending, and they know that and that's a certain percentage of the total cost. So we cannot spend that contingency until the end. So if you look at all of that, we are over with our costs and our budget by $1.6 million, $382,000 for some fire lane access roads that we have to build will qualify, so we'll be able to supplement that, which puts it at $1.2 million over budget. We have unusual site conditions, which I'll talk quickly about in another couple slides. We are asking SFB for those fundings right now. It will be unlikely we get the whole thing, so we'll have to be creative through more value engineering, which puts us at $362,000. At this point in time, Core Construction and their experience in building schools is very comfortable with being able to whittle that $362,000 down. The square foot per cost and separation, again, what school got what. We did a couple of scenarios just to look at data to figure out where would we be. These were never in stone numbers that we were going to build, but just giving us guidelines to when we first started building, because when I first sat down with the school principals, they said, well, who gets what? How much money can I spend? And I said, well, I don't know. So quickly, through this analysis, basically, I looked at how many empty classes were at Sahuarita High School, and they had 5 empty classrooms. We had 5 teachers who are either sharing the classes or are on carts at Walden Grove. Looking at future growth, because we want to be able to handle the 433 students, we know that south of Wrights and Ridge, there's 111 students coming in. That would be high school with the formula that I have. So that would be about 5 more classrooms for SHS. North of Fry's, about 12 more students would come in a high school level for SHS, would be 1. And then south of Walden Grove High School, about 12 students would be produced, probably more, for that area south of Walden Grove. So to bring those 2 schools even, which is what a one philosophy could be, is we would give 1 classroom to SHS and 6 to Walden Grove. Now, if we're knowing we have to build 16, and I've already allocated 7 with that formula, we split up the remaining 9, which would be 4.5 classrooms for each site, which kind of gave us a direction, again, not this is what we were doing, of splitting the square footage of 19,000 and 36,000 by that 34 and 65%. Again, wasn't what we were going to do, but giving us an indication of where we might be looking. Another way we was to look at it, and it was Dr. Vallen's idea, which was a great idea, and again, just one way to look at it, was let's just look at square feet. How many square feet does each space have? So right now, SHS has 174, Walden Grove 131. If we added 43 to Walden Grove, they'd both be even. So if Walden Grove got the first 43,000, and then we split what was left of the 55,000, each one would get 6,000 more square feet, which would be a breakout of 10% for SHS and 89% for Walden Grove. Now, I already know not much you can do with 6,000 square feet when a classroom is, so big. So again, just gave us indicators. So again, what's important, this is the same slide, but at the bottom it says, before the design and the budget, we knew SHS could be between 11 and 35% of the project, and Walden Grove would be between 65 and 89. And that's not what happened, so those studies didn't dictate that very well, and it really came down to budget. What types of classrooms would we build? Would it be music, math, JTED, English? Again, going through all of the different types. And ultimately what we did is, just for an example for PE, how many PE students would be coming if we had 443 students? So what I quickly did was I looked at how many current students take PE at any one time. So looking at historical data, in the center of the screen, I came up with 47% at any one time high school students are taking PE. So again, if each school was going to split the 443 kids, which means 221 would go to each site, 47% of that, you'd have about 105 of these kids that would need PE, and you divide that by a class of 28. Again, very conservative. Usually you need 3 to 4 sections more of PE, which is another FTE. And we did this, and I didn't show it all, but just example of what we did with every subject, knowing how many more classes we were going to need of each. The location at each site. Here is SHS. We looked at 2 sites, number 1 and 2. Number 1 is right behind the football field, and number 2 is down in the lower right corner. We had to throw out number 2 very quickly because you need to have fire access that goes all the way around your school on your own property. So we quickly threw out number 2. Didn't see any other really viable options, so we settled for number 1. So this is where the building is going to go. We're going to have some fire access road up to the northwest, and the yellow lines merely represent fences that will exist. It's not exactly where it's going to be. I just drew them in, but this is going to be an enclosed structure. So any student who goes from the main campus out to the site will still be enclosed, if you will, for security reasons in the day and age that we live in. At Walden Grove High School, here the yellow line represents our actual property. Just remind you, we're in an agreement with Pima County for everything else. We looked at the 3 sites. Number 2 was quickly thrown out because we didn't want to have high volume traffic out there, and we didn't want to have a funnel of fences that all these students were going back and forth with. Now, later for number 2, if we build a black box or an auditorium or something like that, it would be used a little bit less, and it might be more appropriate, but through talking with Principal Miller, nobody really liked that spot. We really concentrated on spot number 1, but it's a retention, and it was going to be very expensive to design there, plus the students were going to have to walk across the bus loop road unless we're going to redesign the bus loop road, which wasn't feasible. So we threw out number 1. So we actually ended up on spot number 3, which is where the tennis courts are. What that means, Betsy, if you go to the next slide, yes, we're going to have to move the tennis courts, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And that will give us an opportunity to go from 4 to 6. And so not the best, but that was actually cheaper for the cost to move those than it was to put it in spot number 2. And that's kind of why we went there. So this is what it's going to ultimately look like. Again, and I'll go more into the design so you know exactly what that's going to look like. Again, the yellow lines are where fences would be. I just kind of drew them in there to let you know that it would be an enclosed space. Kids aren't leaving campus to go out to this spot. The design, again, very inclusive. Principals spoke with their staff. Other principals were at the meetings pretty intensely, advocating for the school. It was neat. What's neat when you build these is you can kind of dream a little bit and design what you really want. And so just a reminder, we had to build 55,000 square feet. If we build 1 square foot less, they give us $330 less. So you really want to build 55,000 square feet. So when you do that, you really have to be creative because it's not a large budget. So you'll see in the final design at SHS, we build one of the spaces that we built was a gym. It's a cheap space to build. Building that gym helped us be on budget because it's a cheap space. So the 2 projects working together was what really dictated what school was going to get what. So SHS in the final budget, remember I told you the design would be between 11 and 35. They actually ended to get 47% of the square footage, and Walden Grove got 53%. And that was really basically to bring it on budget. The design, which is my favorite part, the fun part, here's Walden Grove High School. If we go to the next slide, you can see interior hallways. And on this one, again, we don't like interior hallways because it's wasted space, it's space you have to air conditioning. But if you put them outside, you needed more brick, you needed more, this was more efficient, basically to build a rectangle with some hallways in there. And again, the staff at both sites were involved in both of these. Walden Grove is very JTED heavy, which we'll get to a second, and I'll tell you why, but the opportunity and what we got out of result of that. So here's the band room that will be on the west-hand side. The next slide shows the different pieces of the band room because it's so large. There'll be 5 practice rooms, 2 larger ones, and then three ones at the bottom of the screen. The next slide shows the office. The next slide shows they wanted storage, so they have uniform storage and equipment storage. Off of the next slide on one of the storage rooms, or excuse me, music library, where they put all of their stuff there. And then the last slide for the band room shows an instrument repair. We're going to have like a bathtub type of thing where they can actually submerge the equipment, clean them very well, have hot water, and do it right. And that was great. So the next slide kind of shows it all together in one piece of what that's going to look like. The next slide, and we can go through these very quickly, staff workroom. The next slide is moving on, is for healthcare. They have a lab and a classroom. The next one going up that hallway would be photo, again, a studio and a classroom, and the top of that would be film. The next slide shows sports medicine, which would kind of be nice because it's out there on the side and accessible to the sports field, is a classroom and a lab. We have offices because Mrs. Miller said she needed more offices for counselors and whatnot. So kind of an unusual space, but again, great opportunity to get some more office space that she needed. Custodian and bathrooms. The next slide represents the wrestling room. Because if you know the site now, the wrestling room was really designed as a wrestling room, and we did some other things. And so this is going to be a great opportunity to get a nice wrestling room that they deserve. The next slide shows student council. Next slide shows the locker rooms, because again, they're kind of compacting all in one little spot and they needed more space. The next slide shows 2 extra storage, sorry. The next slide shows 2 extra classrooms that we're still going to repurpose for some type of JTED. And the last one is law, which has a lab and a classroom. Now, before we go to the next slide, this seems so very JTED heavy, and they only chipped in $970,000 if we think about it that way. But all of these classes that are in existing spaces in the building are going to be repurposed. So what, if you will, the district got out of it for the Englishes and the maths and everything else is all of the space that these are leaving. And sometimes these are very specific areas, so it really gave us a great opportunity to build what Walden Grove wanted, and we're still getting all that space for math, English, and everything else. So it looks JTED heavy, but it was really appropriate because we got all that space inside the school now. So for the design of Sahuarita High School, Again, 25,000 square feet, 47% of what our allocation was. The next slide again showing the band room, which is going to be closest to the school, if you remember, right behind it. And we did that on purpose. So here's the band room. Again, the same type of places. They have 4 practice rooms, but I'll show you why in just a moment. This was a request of Sahuarita High School. The next slide represents the office. Next slide represents storage. They have a lot of storage. They asked for a lot of storage. They said they had a lot of stuff. If at any time they wanted to make another practice room, they could usually take those storage rooms and we could change it into a practice room. So again, pretty much the same type of space, but they wanted to start with more storage space and have one less practice room. The next one, again, the music library, and then the final slide, instrument repair again, and then collectively all together you can kind of see what it looks like. The next slide represents some athletic storage right on the corner that they can bring out to the field easily, which is nice. Excuse me, the next slide, interior hallways. Next slide, interior bathrooms. Next slide is all the locker rooms. Next slide is the gym. Next slide is the PE storage right off of the gym. Next slide is a sports medicine that has training rooms and classroom, which is nice because it's out there by the field. They are also going to keep their existing space in their current gym because they have sports there. So this really adds more space, but it's nice that they have something closer to the football field. And then the last one is a new weight room. The existing weight room used to be the wrestling room a long time ago. And if you go to their wrestling room right now, it's in basically what was a classroom. So this really gives them their space back again. And again, this looks PE heavy, but again, the benefit of this is we built a large space, which brought the whole project on budget, so we could build the 55,000 square feet and not lose any money. And again, these classes that are moving out here with band is going to be repurposed to art. We're going to have sports med repurposed to something else. The band, and we're going to have some of the other classrooms. Remember, they had 5 empty classrooms, and so John was able to manipulate that and change that to everything that they can accommodate for his 220 students. The next one for timeline. We're still in the design process. We are going to be bringing the first GMP, which is the guaranteed maximum price, which is nice about this process is once Core gives us a price, there's no way that change orders, unless we change the design, the price is going to go up regardless of what happens in the world. So we're going to bring the first GMP to you next year, or next board meeting, and that is really for the long lead items, the air conditioning units and everything, and it takes a while to get here. They were very antsy about buying that stuff as soon as possible, so we'll be bringing that to you next board meeting, and representatives from Core will be here. Starting in May, we're going to start prepping for construction. You'll start seeing fences going up, and then the main construction will happen this summer, next school year, next summer, and then we'll be able to occupy. So by August 2024, it's a very quick schedule, if you know anything about construction, but Core and Swaim, again, who's been our partner for a while, has done a great job making sure that we're on budget and on time. So I feel very confident in our team. Future budget considerations, because this was very, very tight. In speaking with Core, School Facilities Board, and Swaim, 99% of schools supplement the SFOB budget. We are going to have to come up with some money. Lizette has worked through the budget, and as the money we get, sometimes they take money from SFOB and they buy furniture. We're not buying any furniture. We're putting it all into construction because you can only construct once. So let's do it, the best way that we can, and then we'll supplement it when we get the funds. But some of the things, just so it's aware that the alternates that we're not going to be paying for in this price tag is rubber flooring in the weight rooms, which is about $80,000, ceiling mounted backboards and hoops at SHS. And again, we have some plans for this, because remember, we still have that $500,000 a contingency that we just can't spend. SFB says keep it at the end, so we can spend the first $500,000 on some of this. Locker rooms that we don't have the concrete bases, the lockers or the benches. Synthetic floor in the gym. For SHS, it's not going to be a hardwood floor. This is meant to be an auxiliary gym. It's a practice gym, and we can use it for other things. Sound system for the gym. Again, the furniture. And again, it doesn't pay for the remodel at SHS, because remember, we have some regular rooms that we'll have to change to science rooms. The band room is going to go to art, and the weight room will become a wrestling room. At Walden Grove, it does not include the cost of the tennis courts, lockers, concrete bases and benches again, furniture, and remodel. The band room will change to a dance room. and then the dance room will be something different. And again, working with the principals, they did a great job. They've done a lot of analysis. They've talked to their staff. We've met with band directors, teachers, JTED, everybody, office staff to know that we needed more office. So again, these are the things that it's not going to be paid for, but I'm pretty confident that that we'll still at some point be able to get it done. And with that, I know that was quick, but I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Downs. Does anybody have any questions or comments, discussion? Ms. Lowell?
Yes, we will make contingencies, so although they won't have tennis courts for next school year, we're going to make arrangements that they will still be able to practice and hold tennis. Yeah, and that was the first thing that Mrs. Miller, and that's what I love about working with Mrs. Miller. She's so positive. She's like, we'll get it done. We're not going to turn down this new building because we're not going to have tennis courts for a year. And that might be, a possible discussion action for our community about how do we pay for some of these things, because if we could build tennis courts sooner than later, that could be one of the first things we do is build the tennis courts. Why we're building it. If we bring in cement out for, the building, let's bring out cement and pour some tennis courts. And we can repurpose the lights and everything. That number was repurposing some of those, but that price tag was for 6 courts and not 4. So, great question.
That's a good question. No, there will be a community forum at some point in time in the future to discuss that, where people can ask questions about the
Lots of community forums.
Yeah.
Absolutely, many of them. If I may,
Yes.
President Sparks, just the, I can't help but I think I'm just old and I've been here a while, but I remember the first SFB project that we had here. It was on the trail. And I will be positive and say the SFB has come a long ways. I remember shaking my head when my predecessor told me that when we were building Onza Trail, that the SFB formula did not pay for a flagpole, if you can believe that. And so they've come, and like you saw, the legislature last year appropriated an additional amount. I don't know where we'd be if this was an $11 million project. But this is a multifaceted initiative. One of the things that we're going to be doing, like yesterday, like in January, is we're going to be going out. That's why I say there will be a lot of opportunity to talk, because we're going to talk to community groups, to the chambers of commerce, to the town, to the PTAs, PTOs, and we're going to really say, tell us about not just these schools, but what do we need as a community to be future ready with technology, with instruction, with facilities, with safety at all of our schools, so that we can be intentional about that. And we're already working on the financial side to be super conservative with what we have, with how we use our money, so that we can resourcefully save as much as we can. So I was the one that I told Scott, I said, Scott, you get one shot to build this stuff. You got to build it the best that we can. Let's not cut corners there, but know that we're going to fall short. But with our, if you want to call it our savings account, we are purposely tucking away so that some of those issues that are just critical, we're going to find a way to make sure we take care of them, the most critical first. And the other thing we're going to ask about is, as a community, what do we want for all of our schools? And these schools are included in all of our schools. And so there's local entities have an opportunity besides the state funded to have general obligation bonds. And one of our priorities is how can we, if that's something we want to talk about, how can we do it in a way that is responsible and that maintains stability to the tax rates of our community? And I can tell you that Lizette and I have been working on this. She's been doing the hard work because she's the finance person. But with that compass, with that direction, she's been working on how can we manage our current debt. We refinanced when the rates were nice and low, really nice and low, saved a lot of money. like $1.8 million, I think. And so how can we going forward do this so that we manage our debt, so that if we go forward, and if as a community we say, we want to do more of these types of things at other schools, because, you know, some of our schools are 50 years old or whatever, that we can do it in a way that maintains stability of that tax rate, so that it's not ballooning out of control. The idea is we maintain it where it is or below. So, and we will have those conversations, because that's a bigger conversation than just coming and saying, let's do this. We need to find out, first of all, what is the need? And as you heard a little snippet, or I guess hopefully the theme from Scott, is that this process works better if there's different voices having a chance to chime in and to give input. So we'll have plenty of conversations. Thank you, President. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, that is a correct statement.
And I know it's not part of the formal process, but I can talk to you afterwards if you have some questions too.
Back to you, President Sparks.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Down. Does anybody have any other questions or discussion or comments?
I had a question.
Yeah, Ms. Warner.
So I understand the synthetic flooring and other floors in the weight rooms, things like that at SHS aren't covered. Is there a period of time after construction where these rooms won't have adequate flooring, or?
No, I think our intent as a school district is when we get to the end of this project, when we get the $500,000 released from our contingency, we'll look at our own budget and make sure that we have a good product at the end. We won't have, I don't envision us having a basketball court with no basketball hoops. But just, it's kind of where we are now, and when we get to that point, we'll definitely address it and make sure that we have a great product. Good question.
Mr. Downs, and that's because our work with Core Construction, we worked with them before, they're quite confident that they're going to be able to finish within their budget, which gives us a little confidence on that extra money at the end, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's actually separate. When we look at GMPs, they will say, we will build it for this guaranteed maximum price. They are locked in no matter what and says, we're going to build it, which is great. They have their own contingency in there when things happen and we can do minor things. The $500,000 comes from SFB, and that's money sitting with them that they're just holding, saying, when you finish that and we know that you finished it successfully, now they don't want us to spend all the money and not do it correctly. So as soon as the project is done, immediately we'll be able to come back with a GMP and saying, let's get this, and this, and this, and it'll almost look like a seamless project.
So in addition to that, hopefully, maybe, possibly, there might be some contingencies within the core budget that might be a little extra as well.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Downs. I want to thank you for paying attention to those tennis courts. I happen to know a very popular tennis coach that will be very excited about having 6 tennis courts at Walden Grove. But I appreciate the hard work to kind of start this process and move it forward. And I think it's interesting to have to, lead times are even longer now than they were just a few years ago. Sometimes getting equipment takes a long, long time. So I'm grateful they're thinking ahead, and we've had pretty good luck. I don't think they've ever missed a deadline. So they have not. They tend to do what they say they're going to do. So grateful. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, consent agenda. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. President Sparks, members of the board and public. We have this evening a fairly lengthy list of routine consent matters that by law are allowed to be considered in one comprehensive motion, and that is my recommendation, the approval of the consent agenda in its entirety this evening.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Thank you very much. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Does anybody have any possible future agenda considerations?
I do, Mr. President.
Yes.
I was wondering if we could get on the agenda for discussion at the next meeting. Just something to maybe determine a group study, work study kind of thing, or ASBA training specific to the board, just to kind of a refresher and detailed training for open meeting law, ethics, ADA compliance, things like that in regards to board members, where we would be able to talk, ask questions, the public can be present, things like that.
So I want to make sure I understand. So you're requesting a study session or where we would discuss board policy, or not, sorry, board behavior, open meeting law, regulation in public?
Yes, just because as things change every year and things like that, and we can't talk outside of these meetings, I was hoping we could discuss at a future meeting what would be the best setting and things like that for it.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
I want to make sure I understand and we request the correct thing. So at some future point, you'd like to have a study session to discuss when it's appropriate to have discussions in public or not?
No, I would like to discuss at the next meeting the possibility of having a work study session or a training or something like that.
Okay. I think we can discuss having a training or work study session about board demeanor, behavior, rules, regulations. I'm just trying to figure out what you want the study session to be about specifically.
I apologize for not being specific because I'm just really unsure about how much I can even say because it's not on the agenda, which is another reason that I think it would be like a great item.
Yeah, we're not discussing it, so you can ask for an item specifically at a future point. It's okay.
Yeah, so just an agenda item where the board could discuss the potential future like study session or some kind of training from ASBA specific to our board but open to the public regarding things like open meeting law refreshers, ethics, ADA compliance, board goals, and stuff like that.
President Sparks, first of all, just for the board and public's clarification, ASBA does provide board development and training, and it's very reasonable, prudent, and allowable for the board to invest in its own professional growth. So if I heard the request correctly, for the consideration of an agenda item to discuss the possibility of such training in some way in more detail, if you would just relay that to me, that's just a matter of agenda formulation between us. And if you'd like to do that, be glad to put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I think future training and further training is a reasonable step.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. So the next meeting is scheduled for January 25th here in the auditorium at the regularly scheduled time. I don't have, there's no executive session, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion prior to adjournment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Thank you very much.